I had been home for only a few hours after gallbladder surgery. The anesthesia still clung to me, making my head feel heavy, and my body ache in ways I'd never experienced. You will not believe what happened next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I was resting in my old recliner in the living room, trying to find a comfortable position. My stomach was tender, and every small movement felt like pulling on fresh stitches. Gilbert was sitting on the couch, his eyes on the TV, barely glancing at me. Annette was in the kitchen. I could hear the sound of plates clinking and the cupboard door closing. I swallowed, my mouth dry. "Gil, could you bring me a small cup of tea?" I asked softly. My voice came out weaker than I expected. Before Gilbert could respond, Annette's voice cut through the air like a sharp blade. "We are not your servants," she shouted from the kitchen doorway. The words hit me harder than any physical pain. I looked at her, certain I had heard wrong, but her face told me otherwise. She wasn't joking. Her lips were pressed in a thin line, her eyes cool and dismissive. I blinked, unsure what to say. I'd just had surgery less than 24 hours ago. I couldn't bend, couldn't lift anything without risking tearing the stitches. My doctor had been clear about that. Gilbert didn't look at me. He just kept his eyes on the TV, his body still, as if ignoring the whole thing would make it disappear. I felt the back of my throat tighten. "I'm not asking for much," I said quietly, "just a cup of tea." Annette turned away, muttering something I couldn't catch, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. Her voice, sharp and cold, still rang in my ears. I sank back into the recliner, the pain in my stomach now joined by a dull ache in my chest. It wasn't just the words. It was the way she said them, like my needing help was an insult to her. It's strange how a single sentence can open the door to every memory you've been trying to ignore. As I sat there, I thought about everything I had done for Gilbert and Annette over the years. There was the time, 10 years ago, when they were about to be evicted from their apartment because Gilbert's hours had been cut at work. I had taken $3,000 out of my savings and paid their rent for 3 months so they could get back on their feet. There was the home repair business Gilbert dreamed of starting. He didn't have the money for the tools or the license fees, so I gave him the $8,500 he needed. I didn't expect repayment. I just wanted my son to have a chance to build something for himself. And there was the winter Annette slipped on the ice and broke her leg. She was out of work for months. Medical bills piled up, and the insurance didn't cover everything. I paid the $4,200 the hospital demanded because they were family. That's what family does, or so I believed. I thought those moments had meant something. I thought they had built a foundation of trust and gratitude that would last for the rest of our lives. I never imagined a day would come when asking for a simple kindness would be met with such contempt. I shifted in my chair, trying to hide the fact that my hands were trembling. Part of it was from weakness after surgery. Part of it was from anger, a quiet growing anger that sat heavy in my chest. I glanced at Gilbert again. He still hadn't looked at me. His silence hurt almost as much as Annette's words. This was my son, the boy I had raised alone after his father died. I had worked double shifts at the bakery for years so he could have everything he needed. I had never once turned him away when he needed help. And now, when I needed him, he couldn't even meet my eyes. Annette walked back into the kitchen, talking under her breath. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear, annoyance, as if I were an inconvenience in my own home. That thought made me pause. My own home. Or was it? 6 years ago, I had signed over the title to the house to Gilbert. It had been Henry Torres's idea to include certain conditions in the deed, but I barely paid attention back then. I only wanted Gilbert to have security, I didn't think I'd ever need those conditions. But now, lying in that recliner, weak and hurting, I began to wonder if that decision had been a mistake. I closed my eyes and took a slow breath, feeling the stitches pull. I didn't have the strength to argue that day, but I knew one thing: this wasn't going to be forgotten. Not by me. Annette's words had drawn a line in the sand, and though they didn't know it yet, they had just set something in motion. They thought I was too weak to push back. They thought they could say and do whatever they wanted without consequence. But they were wrong. I didn't know exactly how, not yet, but I would make sure Gilbert and Annette understood something very clearly. You don't get to treat your mother like this. And when the day came, they would never see it coming. I pushed myself forward in the recliner, my hands gripping the armrests. The effort sent a sharp pull across my stomach where the stitches were. I paused, breathing slowly until the pain eased a little. Gilbert stayed on the couch, eyes still locked on the television. The remote rested in his hand like it was glued there. Annette was at the dining table, scrolling on her phone. She didn't look up, but I heard her mutter, "People need to be more self-reliant." I knew exactly who she meant. I got one foot under me, then the other, using the side table to steady myself. My legs felt like they didn't belong to me, heavy, weak, shaky. I'd been warned about this after surgery, but I still thought my own son would help me if I asked. I took a step toward the kitchen. The floor seemed longer than I remembered. My hand stayed on the wall for balance. Every movement made my stomach feel like it was being pulled open. Gilbert glanced my way for half a second before turning back to the TV. He didn't even ask if I was all right. When I finally reached the counter, I held on to it for a moment, letting the cool surface steady me. My kettle was right there, the same one I'd had for years. I filled it and set it on the stove, trying to keep my hands from shaking. I remembered when this kitchen was full of life. Years ago, my husband, Tom, and I had spent weeks picking out the oak cabinets. He'd built the pantry shelves himself. We had worked hard to make this house ours. We bought it in our 40s, mortgage-free after years of running our small repair shop. It was the first place that felt permanent. We talked about how, one day, it would be Gilbert's. A gift, Tom had called it, something solid to pass on. I thought about that as the kettle hissed. That gift didn't look like such a blessing anymore. Back then, the idea of Gilbert living here felt like security for him and for me. I imagined family dinners, help with yard work, and a house filled with people I loved. What I had now was different. I was a guest in the home I had built, and the owners didn't seem to care whether I was comfortable. I poured the hot water into a mug, my hand trembling enough that I spilled a little onto the counter. I took a deep breath and carried it back toward my recliner, step by step. Annette didn't move her eyes from her phone. Gilbert didn't mute the television. The game show's canned laughter followed me across the room like an insult. When I sat back down, I realized something I hadn't let myself think about before. This wasn't just a bad day. It wasn't about me asking for tea. This was a shift, the kind of change you can't undo. The warmth I used to feel in this house was gone. The walls were the same color. The furniture was in the same place, but it didn't feel like home. It felt like I was in enemy territory. Every step I took, every word I said, would be measured and possibly used against me. I looked at Gilbert's profile from across the room. He was my only child. I'd spent years protecting him from life's blows, thinking that someday he would return that care if I needed it. But right then, I could see the truth. He didn't see me as someone to take care of. He saw me as someone who should take care of herself, no matter the pain, no matter the weakness. And Annette, well, I wasn't sure she saw me as family at all. I sipped the tea slowly. The warmth in my hands was a comfort, but it didn't reach my heart. I thought about Tom again. If he were here, he'd be furious. He was the kind of man who believed respect for your parents wasn't optional. He would have said something to Gilbert the moment that first sharp word came out of Annette's mouth. But Tom was gone. It was just me, and I was starting to realize that in this house, I was on my own. I glanced at the picture frame on the side table, our wedding photo. Tom's smile seemed almost like a reminder, a push to stand up for myself. I'd made a decision years ago that I thought was generous. I'd signed this house over to Gilbert with the idea that it would always be a safe place for me too, that I'd never have to worry about where I'd live, or who would be there if I got sick. Now, sitting in my own living room, I wasn't so sure I'd made the right choice. The tea was almost gone when I finally looked at Gilbert again. He didn't look up. I thought about those papers I'd signed at Henry Torres's office. Henry had been my lawyer for years, a good man who never rushed me into anything. He had said, "Alice, let's add a few conditions to protect you." At the time, I just nodded. I didn't think they'd ever matter. Now, I was wondering if they might be my only way to take back what I'd lost. I didn't know all the details, but I knew Henry would. I made a mental note to find out exactly what those conditions were. The rest of the afternoon passed quietly, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of quiet where you know the air is heavy and one wrong word could set something off. I stayed in my chair, listening to the sound of the TV, the soft tapping of Annette's fingers on her phone screen, and my own thoughts getting sharper by the minute. The seeds of doubt about giving them this house had taken root, and deep down, I knew those seeds were going to grow. 6 years ago feels like a lifetime now. It was a rainy March afternoon when I walked into Henry Torres's office carrying a manila folder of documents. My husband, Tom, had been gone for just over a year. The house felt too big, too empty, and I had convinced myself that giving it to Gilbert would bring the sense of family back into these walls. I remember sitting across from Henry at his oak desk. He pushed his glasses up and said, "Alice, if you're set on transferring the title, we should do it properly. And I'm adding conditions for your protection." I wasn't paying close attention. My mind was full of memories of Tom fixing that squeaky front door, painting the living room in the pale yellow we'd picked together, and building the raised garden beds out back. What kind of conditions? I'd asked. Henry explained in that careful, deliberate way of his, if they fail to provide you with reasonable care or a place to live, or if there's a serious breakdown in family obligations, the property can revert to you. It's standard, but important. I remember nodding like I understood every word, though in truth, I only caught the part about standard and important. I didn't imagine I'd ever need to rely on those clauses. That day, Gilbert and Annette came to sign their parts. Gilbert stood in Henry's doorway with his hands in his pockets, trying to hide his smile. "Mom, you don't have to do this," he'd said, though I could tell he wanted me to. "I want you to have stability." I told him, "No more worrying about rent. You can focus on your work and your future. And I'll have family here as I get older." Annette had thanked me, her voice unusually soft. "You're giving us so much, Alice." Gilbert reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. "You'll always have a home here," he promised. I mean it. I believed him. After we left Henry's office, the three of us went out for lunch. I remember the way Gilbert looked so proud telling the waitress, "We just signed the house over to me. My mom's the best." I laughed at the time, feeling like we had taken a step toward being closer. That night, I slept better than I had in months. I thought I'd secured not just their future, but mine too. I saw a picture in my mind. Family holidays here, dinners where everyone brought a dish, grandchildren running through the yard. I'd pictured myself in the corner of the living room, knitting or reading, while the noise of family life filled the air. But that picture feels blurry now. These past few days have stripped the shine off that memory. The warmth I felt that day has been replaced by something cold and heavy. I keep thinking about the contrast between then and now. That afternoon in Henry's office, Gilbert couldn't stop thanking me. He hugged me twice before we left. Today, he won't even get up to help me to the kitchen. Annette's gratitude back then had seemed genuine. She called me family in a way that made me think she meant it. Now, she says we are not your servants without hesitation. It's not just the words they use now. It's the way they act like this is their space, and I'm an inconvenience. The house may have their names on the title, but the memories in these walls belong to me and Tom. I thought giving them the deed would make them feel secure, but maybe it made them forget what this place really means. As I sat in my recliner that afternoon, I made a quiet decision. I needed to know exactly what Henry had written in those documents. I'd kept my copy in the old desk drawer in my bedroom, but I hadn't looked at it since the day I brought it home. I remembered his words clearly enough now. If they fail to provide you with reasonable care, that's not much to ask after surgery. Is it? A cup of tea? Help to the kitchen? A little respect? And a place to live? I'd given them this house with the understanding that I would always have a home here. That was the promise Gilbert made. No hesitation, no conditions of his own. That promise has already been broken. I realized the ache in my stomach wasn't just from the surgery. It was from the slow understanding that the bond one thought was unbreakable had cracks running all the way through it. When I looked over at Gilbert in the living room, I didn't see the boy I raised. I saw a man who had let comfort harden into entitlement. I saw someone who had forgotten who helped him get here. I glanced toward the dining table, where Annette was still with her phone. The woman who once thanked me with tears in her eyes now barely looked up when I spoke. 6 years ago, I thought I was giving a gift that would keep us together. Now, I'm starting to think it might be the very thing pulling us apart. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, thinking of Henry's office, the smell of coffee in the air, the weight of the pen in my hand as I signed the papers. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment I put my future in Gilbert's hands. And now, I was wondering how to take it back. That evening, the house felt colder than usual. The TV was off, and only the hum of the refrigerator carried from the kitchen. I'd kept mostly to myself all afternoon, sipping water and letting the pain medication dull the ache in my stomach. After dinner, Gilbert and Annette sat in the living room, each on their phones. I walked in slowly, holding the doorway for balance. I just wanted to mention something. I began, trying to keep my tone even. The doctor said I shouldn't do much for a few weeks. I might need a little extra help until I'm able to move around more. Annette looked up, then laughed. We're not signing up to be a maid service, Alice. Her words landed heavier than I expected. I'm not asking for a maid service, I said, keeping my voice calm. I'm just saying I might need some meals brought to my room, maybe help getting to the bathroom at night. Gilbert set his phone down, rubbing his forehead. Mom, you're being too demanding. You can walk. You can make tea. You don't need us hovering over you. I felt my cheeks warm. Too demanding? Gilbert, I've been home from surgery for less than a day. This isn't me being lazy. It's me trying to follow medical instructions. Annette's smirk vanished, replaced with a flat, cold look. Maybe you should think about whether this arrangement is working. We've got our own lives, and this, she waved a hand at me, is a lot. I took a slow breath. Maybe you should think about whether you still want me living here at all. The room went silent. Gilbert's jaw tightened. Annette's eyes narrowed just slightly, but enough for me to see the shift in her. Without a word, Gilbert stood and walked toward me. Come on, Mom, he said, his voice low but firm. You should rest. Annette followed, her hand on my arm. Let's get you to your room, she added guiding me down the hall. I can walk by myself, I said, but they didn't let go until I was inside my bedroom. Gilbert closed the door. I heard the soft click of the lock turning from the outside. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the doorknob. My hands went to the nightstand, automatically reaching for my phone. It wasn't there. I checked the bed, the dresser, even the small table by the window. Nothing. They'd taken it. I sat on the edge of the bed, the air in the room suddenly feeling close. My mind raced through the possibilities. Why take my phone? Were they afraid I'd call someone? The thought made my stomach turn, though not from the stitches. The window was cracked open an inch to let in some air. Outside, I could see the top of Mrs. Dunlop's hedges. She lived next door and had been my neighbor for over 30 years. I moved slowly, not wanting to pull my stitches, and pushed the window open just enough to lean toward the screen. "Mrs. Dunlop," I called softly. At first, there was no answer. I tried again, a little louder. "It's Alice." Her back porch light flicked on. A moment later, I saw her appear at the side of her yard, wrapped in a cardigan. "Alice, you all right? I think I need a little help," I whispered. "They've locked me in my room, and I can't find my phone." Her eyes widened. "Locked you in? Why?" "I asked for help after surgery. Things escalated." She pressed her lips together, clearly thinking fast. "Do you want me to call someone?" I nodded. "Henry Torres. He's my lawyer. And maybe," I hesitated, "maybe the police, if it comes to that." "I'll handle it," she said, her voice firm. "Keep your window open. I'll be back." I closed the window to just a crack and sat back on the bed. My heart was thudding, but not from fear, not exactly. It was more a sharp, clear understanding that something had shifted tonight. This wasn't just a cold remark or neglect. This was control. Deliberate control. I thought about the promise Gilbert had made in Henry's office all those years ago. "You'll always have a home here." That home wasn't supposed to include a locked door and no way to call for help. In the quiet, I could hear faint voices from the living room. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clipped short. I didn't know what Mrs. Dunlop planned to do next, but I knew one thing. Whatever happened, I wasn't going to let this be swept under the rug. The house Tom and I built together wasn't going to become my prison. Imagine being locked in your own bedroom by your own family just days after surgery. If you think that's crossing a line, hit the subscribe button right now, because it means you stand against this kind of behavior. And if you can't bring yourself to, I want you to tell me in the comments why. I'm curious what you'd call this, if not abuse. It couldn't have been more than 20 minutes before I heard the faint crunch of tires on gravel outside. Through the crack in my curtains, I saw the familiar blue and red lights flashing against the side of the house. My chest tightened, not out of fear, but from the hope that maybe someone was finally about to take me seriously. A knock sounded at the front door, firm and deliberate. Voices followed, low at first, then louder. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught Gilbert's voice saying, "Oh, this must be a misunderstanding." A few moments later, I heard the door to my bedroom unlock. Gilbert stood there, trying to look casual, but his shoulders were stiff. 2 police officers stepped into the hall behind him. "Ma'am," one of them said, "your neighbor called and said you might be in some kind of distress." Before I could answer, Annette appeared, her face full of false concern. "She's been a little confused from the pain medication," she said. "She thought the door was locked, but it wasn't." I looked straight at the officer. It was locked from the outside. Gilbert jumped in quickly. "Mom, you must have just heard the latch click. It sticks sometimes, remember?" He smiled at the officer like he was sharing an inside joke. The younger officer's eyes moved between us. "Do you feel unsafe here, ma'am?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. Gilbert let out a short laugh. She's just upset because she thinks we're not helping enough. But she's fine, really. Annette held up my phone like she just found it in the couch cushions. And here's her phone. She must have left it in the kitchen earlier. I stared at it. I knew exactly where I'd left it, on my nightstand. One of the officers glanced at the other, then back at me. You don't appear to have any injuries, and they're saying they're here to help. We can't force anything right now, but we're going to ask everyone to keep things calm tonight. And just like that, they left. No paperwork, no real questions. Just a warning about keeping the peace. When the door closed behind them, the room felt heavier than before. Gilbert stood there for a moment, his eyes flat. You didn't have to drag the police into this, he said quietly. Annette crossed her arms. It's embarrassing, Alice. You made it sound like we're doing something terrible. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I knew right then that arguing wouldn't get me anywhere. If I pushed too hard now, they'd only get smarter about hiding what they were doing. Instead, I sat on the bed, taking my phone when Annette finally set it on the nightstand. I didn't check it in front of them. I just placed my hand on it like it was nothing special. Gilbert leaned on the doorframe. Let's just try to move past this. No more calling neighbors. No more drama. I nodded once, not giving them the satisfaction of a fight. Inside, though, I was already making a plan. I knew Henry would have answers. I knew those clauses in the deed could be my way out of this mess. But until I had the legal backing, I needed to keep my head down. Play along. Let them think I'd let it go. When they finally left my room, I heard the quiet click of the door closing. Not locked this time, but it didn't matter. I stayed there, listening to their footsteps fade toward the kitchen. I took a deep breath and finally unlocked my phone. A few missed calls from Mrs. Dunlop, a text that simply said, "I'll keep an eye out." I typed back, "Thank you. I'm all right for now." That night, I didn't sleep much. Every creak of the floorboards made me wonder if they were checking to see if I was still in my room. Every whisper of their voices down the hall made me wonder if they were planning what to say next if the police came again. But in the quiet hours, I realized something important. They had shown me exactly how far they were willing to go to keep control. And now I knew I couldn't just wait for them to change. I would have to take this house and my life back into my own hands. And I would. I realized then, surviving something like this isn't just about staying calm. It's about having people who'd back you up. If you'd be on my side in this, subscribe and share this so more people hear it. And if you wouldn't, at least say why in the comments, so I can understand how anyone could see this as acceptable. The next morning, I woke before the sun. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the fridge in the kitchen. Gilbert and Annette's bedroom door was closed, and I could hear nothing from inside. I dressed slowly, careful not to strain my stitches, and slipped my phone into my sweater pocket. I didn't bother with breakfast. Instead, I took my purse and my spare set of car keys, the ones I'd kept hidden in a sewing box. The air outside was crisp, the kind that makes your lungs feel clean. I got into my old sedan, started the engine, and rolled down the driveway without turning on the headlights until I was clear of the house. Henry's office was only a 15-minute drive, but I felt every bump in the road. By the time I pulled into the small parking lot, my hands were tight around the steering wheel. When I stepped inside, Henry looked up from behind his desk, surprise crossing his face. "Alice, you're supposed to be recovering." "I am," I said, taking a seat. "But I need to see the papers from when I signed the house over to Gilbert. All of them." He didn't ask questions right away. He just got up, went to his filing cabinet, and began flipping through folders until he found the one with my name on it. He brought it over, setting it on the desk between us. He opened it to the first page and tapped a section with his pen. This is the deed transfer you signed. And here," he turned a few pages, "is the reversionary clause I insisted on." I leaned in. The words were dense, but he read them aloud. "If the grantees fail to provide agreed-upon care or otherwise breach fundamental family obligations toward the grantor, ownership reverts to the grantor within 30 days of written notice." I let those words sink in. "So if they're not giving me reasonable care—" He nodded. "You have legal grounds to take the house back, but you'll need to document it. The more specific, the better." I told him about the night before, the argument, the lock on my bedroom door, the missing phone, the police visit. Henry listened without interrupting, his expression hardening. "That's serious, Alice," he said finally. "Locking you in, especially after surgery, could support a claim of elder abuse. The police may not have acted, but a paper trail is powerful. If we move forward, we could use both the reversionary clause and the abuse angle." I sat back, my mind racing. What would I have to do? "For now," he said, "don't confront them directly. Keep a record of everything, dates, times, what was said, what was done. If you can get witnesses, even better if you can discreetly record interactions. Give me 48 hours of solid evidence, and we'll serve them written notice. They'll have 30 days to leave or lose the property back to you immediately if they resist." The idea of playing along didn't sit comfortably with me, but I understood the logic. If I showed my hand too early, Gilbert and Annette might find a way to twist things in their favor. 48 hours, I repeated. Henry slid a notepad toward me. "Write it all down. If they refuse to help you with basic needs, if they speak to you with hostility, if they isolate you, it all counts." I wrote down the date and a brief note about what had already happened. Then I tucked the notepad into my purse. Before I left, Henry looked at me squarely. "Alice, this isn't just about the house. It's about you being safe. If anything escalates before the notice goes out, you call me or the police immediately." I promised him I would. Driving back, I felt steadier than I had in days. The fear I'd felt in that locked bedroom was still there, but now it was tempered with something else, a sense of control I hadn't had since coming home from the hospital. When I pulled into the driveway, the curtains in the living room moved slightly. Someone had been watching for me. Inside, Annette was at the counter with her coffee. "Out early," she said, glancing at my purse. "I needed to get some air." I replied, keeping my tone light. Gilbert came in from the hallway. "You should have told us you were going out." I shrugged, didn't think I needed permission. Neither of them replied. They just exchanged a look, and I filed that moment away in my mind, another small piece of evidence. I went to my room, set the notepad on the nightstand, and took a slow breath. For the next 2 days, I'd keep my voice calm, my movements steady, and my phone close. Every sharp word, every refusal to help, every dismissive gesture, it would all go into that notebook. They thought I was just an old woman recovering from surgery. They were about to find out I was a whole lot more than that. That evening, I decided to test them. Nothing dramatic, just a few small requests to see how they'd respond. I waited until Gilbert was settled in front of the television and Annette was scrolling on her phone in the armchair. My voice was calm, steady. "Gilbert, could you bring me a light dinner? Just some soup and crackers." He didn't even look up from the screen. "You can make it yourself, Mom." I glanced toward the kitchen, then back at him. "I'm still sore from the stitches." He shrugged. "Then order something. We're not running a kitchen service." I made a note in my head and quietly tapped my phone to start recording. His tone said enough. About an hour later, I tried again. "Annette, would you mind getting me a blanket from the hall closet?" Without looking up, she muttered, "You know where it is." "It's hard for me to bend right now." I said. "You'll be fine," she replied, her eyes still on the screen in her hands. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, I was writing every word in that invisible notebook in my head. Later, in my room, I jotted it all down in Henry's notepad: date, time, exact wording. The next morning, I tested them again. "Gilbert, can you help me adjust the recliner? The lever's stuck and it's hurting my side." He didn't move from the couch. "Then just sit somewhere else." I noted the time and tapped the record button again. It was the same pattern all weekend. Short, dismissive answers. No eye contact, no offer to help, even with the simplest tasks. I never raised my voice, never accused them of anything in the moment. I just wrote it all down. By Saturday afternoon, I had pages of notes. Refused to provide food after surgery, recovery, request. Refused to retrieve blanket when requested due to pain. Refused to assist with chair adjustment causing discomfort. Repeated statements of, "You can do it yourself," despite clear medical limitations. Every refusal was another brick in the wall I was building, a wall strong enough to take my house back. On Sunday morning, I caught Annette in the hallway. "Could you help me carry this laundry basket to my room?" She smirked. "Alice, you're milking this surgery. You're not an invalid." That one went straight into the log. I made sure to write the word invalid exactly as she said it. By Sunday evening, I sat at my desk with the notepad open. I went over the pages one more time, making sure every entry had a date and time. Then I pulled up my phone and checked the recordings, short clips but clear enough to hear the tone and words. I knew then that I had enough. The next morning, I called Henry from my room. "I've got it all. Notes, dates, recordings. Do you want me to bring them in?" He told me to come by that afternoon. When I walked into his office, I handed him the notepad first. He read through it quietly, his brow tightening as he turned each page. Then I played him the recordings. Gilbert's flat voice. Annette's clipped replies. No one listening. No one helping. When the last clip ended, Henry set the phone down and leaned back in his chair. "This is more than enough. We'll move forward immediately." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a blank document template. "This will be the notice of gift revocation and eviction. It will state clearly that they have breached the agreed family obligations, failed to provide necessary care after your surgery, and engaged in behavior that could be seen as elder neglect." He began typing, his voice steady as he read aloud each section. "Failure to provide reasonable care during medical recovery period. Repeated verbal dismissal of assistance requests despite documented physical limitations. Incident involving confinement to bedroom and removal of personal communication device. Pattern of behavior creating an unsafe and hostile living environment." Once they're served, Henry continued, "they have 30 days to vacate. If they refuse, we'll file for immediate reversion of the property in court. The law and your deed are on your side." I listened, my hands resting flat on my knees. It felt strange, hearing my life reduced to bullet points. But those bullet points were my proof. Henry finished typing and slid the document toward me for review. "Read it carefully. Once we deliver this, there's no going back." I scanned each line. Every fact was true. Every word was measured. There was nothing to soften. "I want it served," I said. He nodded. "I'll have it delivered tomorrow morning. Do not discuss this with them tonight. Keep to your room if you can. The less they know until it's in their hands, the better." I left his office with the kind of quiet determination that doesn't show on your face but sits heavy in your chest. When I got home, Annette was in the kitchen, pouring herself coffee. "You were out again," she said. "Just errands," I replied. Gilbert looked up from the living room. "You're getting around fine now. Guess you don't need so much help after all." I smiled faintly. "Guess not." They had no idea that in less than 24 hours, they'd be reading a letter that would turn their whole situation upside down. That night, I closed my bedroom door, sat on the bed, and looked at the notepad one last time. Every line of it was proof of who they really were when they thought no one was watching. Tomorrow, they'd find out that I'd been watching the whole time. Monday morning, I was up before either of them stirred. I made myself a cup of tea and set 3 chairs around the kitchen table. The official letter from Henry sat in the center, still in its envelope. When I heard their bedroom door open, I called out, "Gilbert, Annette, I need you both in here." They walked in together, half awake. Annette had a mug of coffee in her hand. Gilbert looked at the envelope on the table and frowned. "What's this?" he asked. "Sit," I said, my voice steady. They sat across from me. I slid the envelope toward them. "This is from my lawyer." Gilbert chuckled, the kind of laugh people give when they think someone's bluffing. "What did you do, Mom? Put us in your will again." I didn't answer. I just opened the envelope, pulled out the letter, and began reading aloud. Effective immediately, the grantor, Alice Haber, is revoking the gift of the property located at 214 Maple Street, in accordance with the reversionary clause outlined in the deed signed on June 12, 2017. The grantees, Gilbert Haber and Annette Haber, are hereby given 72 hours to vacate the premises. Failure to do so will result in immediate legal action and petition for removal. By the time I finished, Gilbert's smile was gone. "Wait, what?" he said, leaning forward. "You have 72 hours. I repeated, the paperwork is already filed. This is not a discussion." Annette's coffee mug clinked as she set it down too hard. "You can't just kick us out. We live here. We've been paying the utilities." I looked her straight in the eye. Utilities don't pay for the years of care and respect this house was supposed to guarantee me. Gilbert pushed back in his chair. "You can't be serious. This is our house. You gave it to us." "That's the part you never understood," I said quietly. "I didn't give it to you as a free handout. I transferred it with a condition, one you both broke." Annette crossed her arms. "Where are we supposed to go? We don't have anywhere else." I leaned back, letting the silence hang for a moment. "That's not my problem anymore. My problem was letting you treat me like a burden in my own home. That ends today." Gilbert's voice was sharper now. "We've done a lot for you, Mom. You're just exaggerating because you're still sore from surgery." I set the letter down and folded my hands. "You want the truth. Here it is. This house isn't something you inherited or that just fell in your lap. Your father and I worked for it. We saved every dollar we could for over 30 years, running our repair shop 6 days a week, sometimes 7. We skipped vacations. We drove the same truck until it wouldn't start anymore. And we fixed things for neighbors for half price just to keep the shop's doors open. This house was bought with those sacrifices. Ours, not yours." Gilbert didn't say anything. He just stared at the table. I went on. "When your father died, I thought putting your name on the deed would give you security. I thought you'd always want me here, and we'd share this space as a family. But I won't live in a place where I'm told to do it myself when I'm fresh out of surgery. I won't live behind a locked bedroom door while my phone is taken away. That's not family. That's something else entirely." Annette opened her mouth to argue, but I kept going. "I planned for this house to stay in the family long after I'm gone, but not like this. Not if it means I have to feel unwelcome in the home your father built for us. You broke the agreement, and the law is on my side. You have 72 hours to pack your things." Annette's tone changed. "Alice, wait, we didn't mean for it to come across that way. It's been stressful with work, and—" "This isn't about stress." I cut in. "It's about respect. And that's been missing for a long time." The kitchen felt colder than it had in weeks. Gilbert kept glancing at the letter, as though reading it again would somehow make the words different. Annette's anger had shifted into something closer to panic. "We'll have nowhere to go," she said again, softer this time. I stood up and pushed my chair in. "You should have thought about that before you treated me like an unwanted guest in my own home. This conversation is over." I left them there, sitting in the kitchen with the letter between them. As I walked down the hall, I could hear Annette whispering urgently to Gilbert, but I didn't slow down. In my room, I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed. I could still hear the faint sound of their voices, but now it wasn't me who felt trapped. For the first time since coming home from the hospital, I felt in control again. They had 72 hours, and I had my house back. Some of you listening might think this was harsh. Others might say it was justice. If you believe I was right to stand my ground, hit like and share. It's the only way I'll know you'd have done the same. The next 2 days passed like a slow-moving storm. Gilbert and Annette packed in silence most of the time, their footsteps heavy on the hardwood floors. Every so often, a door would close a little harder than necessary, or I'd hear a drawer slide open and shut with more force than needed. I stayed out of their way. There was nothing left to say. On the second afternoon, Annette appeared in the kitchen while I was wiping the counter. She held a small box in her hands, her eyes tired. "Alice," she began, her voice softer than I'd heard it in weeks, "I know things got bad. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry if I came across wrong. I was stressed, and I wasn't thinking." I set the dish towel down and looked at her. "Annette, I appreciate you saying that. But this isn't just about one bad week. This is about a choice you made to treat me as if my needs didn't matter." She looked down at the box, shifting it from one hand to the other. "People make mistakes." "Yes," I said, "and they also live with the consequences." She nodded slightly, as if she knew there was no changing my mind. Then she turned and walked back down the hall. Later that evening, I passed Gilbert in the living room as he was sealing a cardboard box with tape. Without looking up, he said, "You shouldn't have been so quick to judge, Mom." I paused. "Gilbert, I didn't judge. I experienced. I lived it, and I can't live like that again." He didn't respond, just pressed the tape down hard and moved the box aside. By the morning of the third day, the air in the house felt thinner, like it was ready to be cleared. When they carried the last of their boxes to the front door, I stood by to hand them over. "Here," I said, holding the top, one steady as Annette adjusted her grip. Gilbert stepped back into the house, once more fishing in his pocket. He pulled out the key ring with the house key still on it. For a moment, he just stared at it. Then he placed it in my hand without a word. I closed my fingers around the cool metal. "This house was always meant to be your safe place," I told them. "But the choice to keep it that way was yours. The moment you decided kindness was optional, you decided this outcome." Annette looked away. Gilbert nodded stiffly. I opened the door wider. "Take care of yourselves," I said simply. They walked down the front steps together, their voices low as they headed to the driveway. I stood in the doorway until the car pulled away, then closed the door and leaned against it for a moment. The house was quiet, not the heavy kind of quiet that comes from tension, but the kind that lets you hear your own breath. I walked slowly from room to room, looking at the space in a way I hadn't for years. The kitchen felt bigger, without the constant clatter and chatter. The living room was free of the piles of jackets and shoes that had taken over. My bedroom door, for the first time in a long time, felt like it was truly mine. I wasn't celebrating a victory. This didn't feel like winning anything. What I felt was peace, a peace that came from knowing I had protected my dignity. I thought about Henry's words when I'd signed the paperwork 6 years ago, and how I'd trusted that kindness would be a given between family. I'd learned the hard way that trust should be backed up by actions, not just intentions. There was sadness, yes, These were people I had loved and helped. I had pictured Sunday dinners together, not legal notices and locked doors. But sometimes you have to accept that people will show you who they really are, and then you have to believe them. I poured myself another cup of tea and sat by the kitchen window. The maple tree outside was just starting to turn at the edges, the first hint of autumn. For the first time since my surgery, I didn't feel the need to brace myself for what might be said next. I could breathe in my own home without feeling like a guest. I knew people might have different opinions about what I'd done. Some might say I should have given them another chance. Others would say I waited too long to take action. That's why I want to ask you, the one listening to my story, if you were in my place, would you have given them another chance? Or would you have done exactly what I did? Think about that. And if my story made you feel something, whether it was anger, understanding, or even surprise, I'd like to hear from you in the comments. Share your thoughts, your own experiences, and what you believe you would have done. If you found this worth listening to, please like this video, share it with someone you think might need to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Your engagement is what helps stories like this reach others who might need them. Because in the end, it's not just about a house. It's about knowing when to stand up, even if it's to the people you once thought would always stand with you. And I can tell you, it's never too late to do just that.